This is SoundNotion, the weekly podcast for new music and music news. I'm Patrick Gulo.
I'm David McDonald.
I'm Sam Merciers.
And this week we're joined by the founders of Symphony Number 1, an ensemble and organization founded in 2014 that aims to change the landscape of classical music programming and highlight new and emerging composers. We have with us music director Jordan Randall Smith, director of development and artistic operations Sean Myers, and composer in residence Mark Fromm. Thanks for joining us, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks a lot.
So I would say this is a pretty ambitious undertaking.
What, founding an orchestra or writing a piece of orchestral music?
Yes.
Both. I'm just curious, did you start this project because you felt there was a need for it in the industry, or are you simply lovers of contemporary music and wanted your own outlet for it, or something else?
Yeah, well, I think that certainly all of us share that love of contemporary music, and my background is in percussion, and so kind of Sean being a saxophonist, we're both very accustomed to kind of that coming out of that world as a very young musician. You can't help but be a little bit more immersed in that world. But yeah, we definitely see a need that composers will, and I'm sure you can tell us, tend to have opportunities for short pieces, tend to have opportunities for chamber music for sure, and opportunities maybe for an orchestral work of some sort, but maybe a shorter piece. But an opportunity to really have a large canvas is something that we feel like there's a strong need for, and that's what we think that's the niche we think we can fill probably the best.
Yeah, I'd say that. I mean, a lot of younger composers today are, simply don't have the outlet to write a big work that they've been working on for a long time, and something that is. Did we lose them?
We might have Mark. So we'll talk to you. we'll talk to Mark because Mark didn't go away.
Sure.
So that's I think what Jordan was just saying is really interesting way to look at it, because we do sometimes have these opportunities to write these kind of the orchestral opener kind of thing,
Right.
where you get 6 minutes and a cloud of dust at the beginning of an orchestra concert that's going to inevitably end with a Brahms symphony or something.
Exactly.
And so I'm wondering, what you see the difference is for you in this kind of situation.
I've been gravitating towards writing longer pieces, I guess maybe just as I've grown as a composer. So having the opportunity to do that in an orchestral setting is really exciting. And yeah, like everyone says, we get a 6-8 minute orchestra piece maybe. And we also have to really think about the forces that we use. A lot of times, we might only have 1 or 2 percussionists or something like that. And so I always end up writing for the smallest forces possible, just in hopes that any orchestra will be able to play it. In the case of Symphony Number 1, it's actually really specific. They give us the instrumentation for that concert, so we know exactly who we're writing for, which there's some more opportunities there than just kind of hoping that all the players you need will be there.
So, Symphony Number 1 is described, it seems in most of your materials, as a chamber orchestra. So, how big an orchestra are we talking in your kind of ultimate vision of this ensemble?
Yeah, well, it's really designed to be repertoire driven. So from concert to concert, we hope to have a kind of a core orchestra that we're going to look to audition and go through that process in the fall. But it will definitely be driven by, so for instance, the first concert of next year, we will be using the orchestration that Schoenberg and Stein did of Mahler 4. And so that will be the kind of the core instrumentation, to which we'll add Sean will be joining us as the soloist on that concert. But the second concert of the season will be an all strings concert. So it's going to be variable in that regard. And we think that's going to help composers because, speaking as a conductor who's tried to produce projects like this in the past, you're looking for repertoire and you're trying to figure out, based on the instruments that you have available, what else what can I pair with this? What would work with this instrumentation-wise without adding too many other players? So it's kind of reduces the economic threshold to being able to program the new composer's pieces. So somebody could take a look at Mark's music and directly lift our program with the hope, that kind of thing could work out.
I think our first concert here is going to have about 22 to 24 players on it, and that's going to change maybe within plus or minus 5 to 10 players, but like Jordan said, it really depends on the repertoire that we've chosen.
Okay. We're having a little trouble hearing you, Sean. Could you say it again, please?
Okay. For this concert, we have about 23 to 24 players. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So, but like Jordan said, our repertoire is going to determine the number of players that we generally have on these concerts.
All right. So you mentioned you've got a few plans for the kind of future ensemble forms that you're going to work with. Do you have any kind of long-term goals for this project? Where do you see this thing going?
Yeah, we have some pretty ambitious ideas about where we hope that it can go. We've been really blown away, honestly, by the. Certainly with you guys having us on the show today, we're thankful, and I should have mentioned that sooner. Thankful for having us on the show. But just in general, between you guys. Oh, sorry. Yes, Patrick.
No,
I thought you were raising your finger. I saw the finger. I thought you were saying it.
I often have points, but one of them was not now.
This is not one. Well, as I was saying, yeah, I think we've been very pleased with the outpouring of support, and really I can only point to two things, and certainly the execution of the team has been phenomenal on that. I've been really blessed to have great people like Sean and like our executive director Nick Bentz, who just had a great premiere just last night with another local group. But that's one side of it, is the execution side. And the other side is that we have a really great idea, I think, and I can brag about it because it wasn't my idea actually, and that was the format. We talked originally about being strictly a contemporary music ensemble, and at some point it kind of came to us the insight, and again it wasn't mine, so I can talk it up. But it was actually James Young, who's another composer, who said, no, what if we just did one composer at a time, one contemporary composer at a time, and that's the feature.
So what do you think you get out of that program structure? What is the virtue of that as opposed to an all new music performance?
I can probably take
Yeah.
Yeah, so what I think is exciting about that kind of new form of concertizing is that with a lot of contemporary music ensembles that do exclusively contemporary music, I might be wrong because I'm still kind of new to the scene, but I would say the audience is mostly geared towards that kind of music. So what we're planning to do is to program these new works and also program music that is familiar to a lot of people. So that familiarity will help bridge the gap between new music and a wider audience.
I think a fringe benefit is that getting the concert ready is, I would say, basing this on sort of what you see in an average new music setting, whatever that is, getting the concert ready will be easier. If you're hiring a bunch of musicians who play music from the canon all the time, getting that music ready, concert ready, is going to be a little bit easier, and maybe let you be a little bit more adventurous even when you select the featured new piece.
Oh, I absolutely think that's true. I think that you have two approaches. There's the traditional orchestral approach where you might have a shorter piece and it probably won't get a lot of rehearsal time, or you can have a concert full of new music and new vocabularies that the musicians need to learn all at once. That's the kind of the contemporary ensemble approach. And so this, I think, hybrid approach, I think, allows us to be able to focus the lens both in it's interesting you bring that up because we've been thinking about it mostly, I think, from the audience perspective, But you're very right that just from the rehearsals perspective alone, that that the musicians are going to be familiar with your other repertoire, and you can really focus in rehearsal time a lot more on
So,
really getting a polished premiere.
Certainly.
For the new works that you're featuring in the program, are they getting, especially if they're longer pieces, are they getting prime time second half of the concert space?
That's precisely what they're getting. In fact, that's one of the things that we talked about. Is we said, what we like about the traditional orchestra concert template. You have your opening, maybe 10 or 5-minute work. Opener could be a new piece, could be an old piece, right? You get maybe your Mozart piano concerto or something, and then you get your second half. You get your Brahms, your Tchaikovsky symphony, and we said that's all great, except let's cut out the second half and replace that with a new piece.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Sounds pretty good.
So I think we're ignoring the elephant in the room here, though.
The Kickstarter?
The Kickstarter. And not only are you guys here to push your Kickstarter, which to raise money for this very worthwhile endeavor, but as of this morning when we were getting ready to come on, it's funded. Yay!
Yeah, we're very excited.
That doesn't mean that people shouldn't give money, though. Absolutely keep giving money.
There's some awesome stretch goals.
Yes, there are some awesome stretch goals, and we're very close to our first stretch goal already. We're only about $1,000 short of that one. But yes, we have some very really we know what to do with. Someone could write us a check for $100,000 today, and we know exactly what we would do with it. So I mean, we're ready. We're built for this.
So tell us about the Kickstarter. How's that going? What sorts of things are you offering people, and what are some of those exciting stretch goals?
Yeah, well, I think that the larger point, kind of the stretch goals are enumerated, I think, in our project. And I have to be honest, we wrote a lot of different goals, and so I don't know that I can recite them all back to you at the moment, but. To produce, it's kind of shovel ready, I guess, to borrow from the well, I can't remember what I'm trying to borrow from, but they're shovel ready projects. In other words, we just need the cash. We're ready to put out our shows in the fall, for instance.
And you're looking for scores too. Like one of the levels people can back at is kind of the entry fee to your call for scores, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The call for scores is, to be clear, I mean, we're not looking to, I know this is kind of a controversial issue for some composers, and it's worth touching on, that some people have really strong opinions about the fee. We want to make it clear that we're not looking to fund the project. I mean, we've already funded the project at a minimum level off of that. Obviously, it costs money to get good panelists to listen to a lot of music. But we're really more interested in getting a lot of composers investing in the project. I mean, a couple of you guys have been very generous yourselves in promoting it, and that's really what we want to do, is to encourage. I mean, we're looking for startup cash, and what we want to do is not be chasing, sort of over the African savannah, looking for game just to get through the next concert, but that we can really have the funds that we need to be able to immediately start shooting long term towards larger grant applications, towards corporate sponsorship, towards philanthropic giving that will be able to sustain us for longer periods of time, we think. So
this is not something you envision doing on a regular basis?
Doing Kickstarters? Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, I think our hope is that we can get the funds that we need now to be able to be comfortable for long enough that we can really think long term and not have to be relying on crowdfunding maneuvering at all times necessarily.
Yeah, I think that's exciting, and I think that's the way to go, because you can't be pounding the same group of people who, even if they really love what you're doing, are probably not going to be able to support it at the same level every year or every 6 months or whatever you would need to do this to keep an orchestra afloat. So that's really cool.
Kickstarter.
Say what?
It is called Kickstarter, not continuously giving money.
Well, there are other platforms for continuously giving money, but yeah, you're right. We're kickstarting, not continuing. So I think it's. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, where can we expect to? Are you guys performing in multiple venues all over the place? Where will we be able to hear and see these concerts?
Okay, so I think, well, we're based in Baltimore, so the majority of our concerts are going to be in the Baltimore area, and we're hoping to expand in the future, possibly into the DC metro area. But our first concert is going to be at the Baltimore War Memorial, just outside of the Mount Vernon neighborhood in Baltimore. So it's a very local place. It's got a lot of cultural, it's a cultural institution. So we're excited to be performing there. But I don't think that's going to be our only place, our only venue for performance. It certainly is for our first concert, though.
It's May 8th and 9th.
Great.
So I was wondering when I was looking at that, had you guys already... The Kickstarter, is that to fund all the people who will be playing on that concert?
Yes, we have pushed all in. Yes, so it absolutely is. So that's one of the thrills now. Is it's like, okay, we can worry about making music now.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like that's a big deal because you had to secure soloists, and I'm assuming these people aren't playing for free. So that was
right.
a bold move.
Well, we were very fortunate to be able to get Jordan Thomas and Raul Cho as our soloists for the Mozart Harp and Flute Concerto on board with us, and they really believe in the project. And really, everybody in the team has been really paying it forward. I think because we all see that this is a cultural good that we can collectively do.
I also think that it's worth pointing out that while we've been talking about this as framing pieces, quote, from the canon along with a new piece, included in these concerts coming up in May is Webern, Anton Webern, that is, Opus 21, which you don't see performed a ton, I would say. So we're not gonna. It's not just gonna be Mozart and Schubert and then a new piece. We actually get some other.
Well, and even the Mozart is not necessarily the most popular, commonly performed Mozart work.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, so that in fact Schubert is the one I think standout, very central core piece in the canon that we're touching on in the concert. So yeah, I mean we're definitely looking to be adventuresome, and really we're not doing this in this concert, but we really have ideas about getting further into the other bookend of music history. We've talked about Gesualdo, we've talked about Ockeghem and some other things, some other ideas down the line. We know composers are all a lot of you guys are fanboys of Ockeghem. So,
Sure.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit about your first symphony that's going to appear on these concerts?
Yeah, so at least for me as a composer, I definitely think a lot about the instruments that I'm using. And so the instrumentation for this was really specific. So we started with the Mozart Harp and Flute Concerto instrumentation. So we have solo flute, harp, 2 oboes, 2 horns, and chamber strings. And then with the Webern, you add 2 clarinets to that. And then, by the way, I'm a bassoon player, and Jordan and I talked at the beginning that if I'm going to write a symphony, it's going to contain a bassoon for sure. And in addition to that, Sean is a saxophone player, so I added saxophone to that lineup as well. So we have flute, 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, saxophone, bassoon, 2 horns, harp, and chamber strings. And I really tried to use the resources of those instruments and think a lot of it like chamber music, but then sort of like Mahler in his symphonies, you have a lot of really chamber type vignettes, I guess, short little chambery things. So I have a lot of that in the symphony, as well as then using the full ensemble a lot.
Mahler asks for 110 people on stage so that he can use them 8 people at a time.
Right.
That actually answers a question I had about, so do the composers who are writing for these different concerts, where they're obviously, as we've discussed, matching what they do to the available ensemble, are they going to have access to the soloists as well? And is that sort of and I'm getting the impression that for yours, Mark, you do. Is that going to be the way it works if you have a soloist playing some piece like that's not the commission piece? Will the composer always have access to that soloist as a player or as a soloist?
Or is it the other way around?
Well, it's interesting in the case of in the fall we're looking at this the smaller 4-chamber orchestra, which is basically woodwind quintet as well as a string quintet with bass, of course, and then what am I leaving out? 2 keyboard players, so 4 hands worth of keyboard possibly, and then 2 percussionists. To that, of course, the final movement adds soprano. And in talks with the composer we're using, Andrew Boss, friend and former Peabody student, who'll be composing, we were discussing the forces that we had available. He didn't seem particularly interested necessarily with adding voice to his work. But then we started talking about the ensemble that we had, and I mentioned, of course, that Sean is a saxophonist, and he said, well, what if I just wrote a saxophone concerto for you? And we think that'll be a pretty neat thing. But no, yeah, I think they'll have access to the soloists to whatever degree we're able to. I mean, in this case, Mark is not particularly, I think, using harp and flute. Those same players will be in the orchestra, but I don't believe he's using them. And I should say any more soloistically than any of the other instruments in his symphony.
Sure.
He could speak to that.
And least of all, bassoon, of course. It begins with a very extended bassoon solo, but yeah, I didn't treat the harp and the flute particularly soloistically. There's a lot of exposed harp stuff, but yeah, they're not really featured soloists.
So you mentioned something there, Jordan, that has been interesting to me reading about this project, is that Sean is a saxophonist and is involved in the creation of this orchestra project, and I'm just curious about what draws a saxophonist to an orchestra project like this.
What are you doing?
Yeah. Are you lost?
Am I lost? Oh no. Well,
Took a wrong turn one day down the hallway.
Right.
yeah. No. Well, I mean, I as a saxophonist, the majority of our repertoire is new music, and I'm really excited about working with composers to write new music. And as a lot of musicians probably know, especially composers and saxophonists, perhaps the saxophone is maybe underrepresented in the orchestral genre as a whole. Like we have a lot of really great works that we get to play on, starting all the way back with works by Prokofiev and Mussorgsky and our own kind of canon of concertos. But I think Symphony No. 1 is a really great place to insert the saxophone into that genre, because the saxophone has a lot of expressive and technical capabilities that can be, I wouldn't say exploited, but can be used to great benefit. I mean, as you probably know, just this past year, a saxophonist has won a Grammy for Best Orchestral Performance in John Adams' pieces City Noir and his new saxophone concerto. So I think now that the saxophone is starting to gain a little bit of ground in the orchestral world, we might be able to continue that thread. And I'm just excited. I'm excited to get to be wandering here and get lost in that scene.
So take the I have actually seen, believe it or not, this exists, an orchestral excerpt book for saxophone.
Yes, I have it.
Yeah, so
The one that's out there.
there's
It's a really short book.
there's 2 volumes of it, I think, actually.
Yeah.
And the thing is, like, if you look, like, of course, my wife has it for clarinet, and you see a lot of the standard pieces, and you open up the one for saxophone, and you're like, oh, look, there's a Walton piece in here, and a Birtwistle piece in here, and composers that you don't see in your normal orchestral excerpt books.
Right.
So we've actually had Tim McAllister on the show right before he premiered that concerto.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, and he's been playing it. It's obviously was well received, been playing it all over the world. So
I saw him down in Miami in the fall. It was really
the
good.
saxophone world is waiting with bated breath for the print version to come out.
Yes.
Is that true? Patrick works at Boozy and Hawks.
Oh yeah. I mean, I've gotten a chance to look at the perusal score. I think John Adams has that on his website, or either for the concerto or for his City Noir. But yeah,
I think they're both on Boozy.com actually. So
I'll be checking that
That
out.
was a very subtle plug there.
Boom. It seems like generating a piano reduction of John Adams type music would be the difficult part. At least that's not what I would be looking forward to.
So I want to return to Mark because we haven't talked to Mark very much yet, and he's the composer, and so he's the one that I think is by far the most important part of this. So you mentioned earlier that you've been writing for kind of larger and larger things. Are you talking about the scale of the work in its duration, or the size of the instrumentation? Because one of the things that I always think about when writing a piece and looking for the next piece that I want to work on is that I just don't have these opportunities like you're talking about for these large ensembles, and I'm not going to write a giant piece and just hope that somebody is interested in playing it. So how are you? What is the process like that's different for this kind of thing compared to some of the things you've been doing before?
Well, by large, I meant in duration. So
okay.
Yeah, I mean, about was a year or two ago, I wrote about an 18-minute long piece, which had been the longest piece I'd written up until that point. I just recently finished a contrabassoon concerto, which was about 16 minutes.
Wow.
And that was a commission, so that was for a specific group. But
yeah, I wouldn't think contrabassoon concerto is the thing you just wake up in the morning and decide that's the new thing.
Yeah, exactly. One of the things that I've always sort of thought about when I became familiar with Mahler 4, which is just one of my favorite symphonies, I really loved how the opening of that symphony, you have the sleigh bell kind of eighth note motive, and that happens a couple times in the first movement, and then an hour later when you get to the fourth movement, that music comes back, and it's really shocking, I think. And so by having these larger scale works, you're able to play with things, things like that, things that you've started at the beginning and then sort of the audience forgets about, and then way at the end of the piece you can bring them back, and it's surprising. Not to, I guess, give away my Symphony Number 1, but that's something. Yeah, that's something that I definitely wanted to do with having larger duration available to me.
And it's pretty bold of you to call. I mean, I don't know. Naming pieces is. I'm always interested in what people decide to name their pieces, but it's Symphony Number 1. I mean, it pretty much puts it out there.
Yeah, that was another thing, actually, just thinking of this in terms of a symphony, because I think as composers we all sort of grow up listening to symphonies and intending to write our symphonic canon, and then we become adults and we realize it's not really done too much.
That's not how the world works.
Yeah, it's not how, it's not available to us, really. So even just thinking, what it means to sit down and if I have a recording from Symphony Number 1 and hit play, like what that means as a symphony. It's a much different. It put me in a much different mental state writing it, I think, than just an orchestra piece that might be, 15, 20 minutes, something like that.
So do you feel like you somehow solidified something by calling it Symphony Number 1?
I think so, yes. At least in terms of my compositional process, I really had to understand what that meant for me as a composer.
Yeah, and the Albert and Costello possibilities really open up when you're saying, I'm writing Symphony Number 1 for Symphony Number 1.
Yeah. Well, I'll just on that note point out that that very much is precisely the genesis of the name of the ensemble. As we were thinking, it's a kind of a play, of course, knowing that symphony can refer to a genre or it can refer to the ensemble itself. But that the name actually reflects the fact that we want to create, again, that large canvas for composers to be able to write, in this case, a first symphony. And when I pitched it to Mark, I said, I mean, that's the idea. By no means did it need to be a symphony. the form was not important to us. Just that he would be able to write the piece that he wanted to write. But it kind of puts it directly in the name. We're out to do not little pieces, but substantial works. A robust piece in length and in form and in content, and to give them the room to really do that.
Yeah, I mean, like Sam said, that's a pretty serious thing to slap that name onto something, or it was Patrick that said it, but to put the name symphony on a work is pretty intense. It reminds me of it's probably an apocryphal story of Debussy's string quartet, where he hadn't assigned any of his works opus numbers to that point, but he was writing a string quartet, and so now felt like a real serious composer writing a string quartet, and wanted to give that piece an opus number. But he didn't want to give it the number opus 1 because composers' opus 1s usually suck because of early, and so he gave it the opus number 10, and it's the only work of his that has an opus number, and he assigned it himself just because he was so thrilled that he'd done this super serious thing of writing a string quartet, like an abstract string quartet. And this strikes me as a similar thing. Like I would feel really kind of intimidated if I sat down to a blank sheet of paper and wrote the word Symphony Number 1 at the top.
It's funny for a composer like Debussy though, because like think about how substantial a piece like La Mer is.
Right,
and
like,
like,
it's not a symphony.
Right, but
Yeah.
He's got a string quartet, so he's the real deal now.
Right.
So your current call for scores, which I already addressed this, how you're programming not stuff like directly from what most people consider the canon, stretching all the way from Mozart to Beethoven. You're including a piece by, or at least planned, is John Adams and Boulez to be paired with one of the winners, or I'm assuming one of the winners. It says there's going to be 2 winners selected from the current call, and those will not be on the same concert. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. So the Chamber Symphony would be one concert, and Derive would be on a different the Boulez would be on a different concert.
Right. So the winners are selected from sending in their quote representative scores, but then they will then be informed of what instrumentation they're going to have access to after they win. Is that correct?
Well, yeah, I think it'll be a very similar process to the one we're doing with Mark, and certainly with Andrew, and with Nicole Murphy from Brisbane is our other composer in the fall, with both of them, where there will be a little bit of give and take. So with Mark, I mean, we talked about it. Here are the forces. Here's the superset, of Webern and Mozart that would be available to you. The Schubert actually came later in the process. I'll point that out. So it was purely just the union of the Mozart and Webern instruments, and here's the canvas, and then on top of that, if you had an instrument or two that you felt you would like to be able to include, then we can talk about that. So we talked about percussion. We had talked about we mentioned one of our team members is a saxophonist, of course, as we said, and then he of course mentioned, well, I'd really like to have a bassoon. I don't see writing without at least a bassoonist. And of course, he used it prominently, so then we're more than happy to, to fork out the money to bring in a bassoonist for that. But yeah, did I answer your question? I don't recall now.
That answers it perfectly.
Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans for any recording projects? It's one of the things that always disappoints me when we talk about all these great performances on the show, and we never get to hear them because I live in Florida and Sam lives in Alabama, and Patrick gets to go everything because he lives in New York City. But for those of us that can't go to Baltimore to hear this music on a regular basis, do you have any plans for any recording projects of these works that you're commissioning?
I think we're planning on doing a professional level recording of the concerts. of the concerts, and I think one of our stretch goals should help to fund that. So I guess that's another plug for the Kickstarter. If we're able to make one of those goals, we will be able to fund that recording project.
I'll add that we're certainly going to be doing a live recording of all the concerts. That's extremely crucial to our mission. If there's no record of this, then what good are we if we're putting these pieces out there and then the composers aren't able to? The idea is that the composer is going to be able to use this to parlay into additional opportunities past that. And there was kind of a prototypical, there was a prototype concert really 2 years ago with, I keep mentioning Andrew Boss, that he and I did together. It was a cello concerto that he wrote. It was 48 minutes long with our dear friend, the late Dmitry Volkov, was our cello soloist. He died about a year ago, unfortunately. But this was 2 years ago that we did this project together. And he then went on to UT, where he's now a doctoral candidate. And he's had a lot of success there, based in part on the fact that he was able to take the recording of his cello concerto to Jerry Junkin. And Jerry was enamored of his music very quickly, and he offered him an opportunity to have. And so he wrote a symphony for wind band, which the UT Wind Ensemble premiered this past fall. And I believe he already lined up his second performance. I think it just happened last week in Florida of that same piece. So several different large opportunities have all been falling out of that one project, and that was part of the notion that we had was that I guess this is SoundNotion. We should talk about SoundNotion. So that's one of ours.
It was a SoundNotion.
That's wonderful, and it's such like you said, it's such an important thing for composers to have those recordings in their portfolios. But I think it's cool that you guys are thinking about that as you're kind of putting this project together from the beginning. And like I said, they're so important to the rest of us just for hearing this stuff that we otherwise wouldn't get to hear. And there's so many orchestras that have really taken on recording projects as a key part of their mission. Like the Boston Modern Orchestra project is just, seems like they've got a new recording out every month. And it's so helpful, and I think it's beneficial to us as a community making new music that we can all listen to Andrew Norman, which everybody seems to still be talking about, that recording of Andrew Norman's play that Boston Modern Orchestra project recorded like a year ago now, right? But anyway, so that's a really cool thing that you guys are doing.
Since I'm down here in Alabama, I'm just going to put this out there. If you're already paying people to have nice microphones set up and everything, that's like the bulk of the work in streaming the concerts right there, is having good audio. So just putting that out there.
No, yes, absolutely. That's a really great idea. To live stream our concerts so that anybody can watch it.
All the cool orchestras are doing it these days.
Yes, we will be live streaming for certain.
Oh yeah, awesome.
Count on it.
I have can I switch gears here for just a sec?
I'll allow it.
So tomorrow, Monday, is the announcement of the Pulitzer Prize. Are there any who thinks is going to be the winner for music? Music
I don't even
finalists,
know who's
winner,
nominated.
anything?
Yeah, who are the finalists, Patrick?
No, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't come in that you see who the finalists were upon the announcement. So
I don't know.
Is it going to be Andrew Norman?
I wouldn't be surprised if he was on the list.
Jennifer Higdon, Cold Mountain.
I don't think it's been played yet.
Does that really make a difference?
I think so, yeah, actually.
When is that playing?
It's like this summer, isn't it?
August.
Yeah.
No, July. And Megan and I are trying very hard to figure out a way to get out there.
I don't know. It could be Andrew Norman. I don't know who else it would be.
Although we did learn on the show, I think we covered this a little bit, how the process of being nominated and having your work considered for the Pulitzer Prize is not nearly as enigmatic or otherworldly as you might imagine. Somebody has to recommend that you win. That's basically what it boils down to. It's there's no bar you have to cross just to be entered in the contest.
I mean, I think they will keep their eyes open for people who aren't even nominated, but basically, you have to be nominated.
Yeah. We do have one piece of news that we need to address as a resident of Florence, Alabama, one of the quad cities of the Shoals area here in Alabama, one of the other places being Muscle Shoals. I have to mention that the Music World lost Percy Sledge of When a Man Loves a Woman fame. Like I said, I have to mention that because most of you, I guess all of you probably know, Muscle Shoals is famous now as a recording venue, including, the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney and Aretha Franklin, and the list goes on and on and on. When a Man Loves a Woman was the first #1 hit to come out of Muscle Shoals. Mm. And he died, I think, on last Tuesday.
Goodbye, Percy.
Goodbye, Percy. And whenever you listen to this, by all means, please listen to Percy Sledge and not Michael Bolton's Abomination.
Well, listen, guys, Mark, Sean, Jordan, thank you guys so much for being here this morning. It's been great talking to you. We had a great time.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Where should people go to find out more about what you guys have going on? Keep in touch with the project.
You can find us at symphno1.com. So that's SYMPHNO and the number 1. That's probably our weakest point. Is our URL takes a little. It's kind of hard to describe verbally.
But you can also
you get something weird like dot plumbing or something. People remember it. Symphony #1.plumbing.
You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and we also have our Kickstarter campaign, which...
There's a link on our website to the Kickstarter. Excellent.
We'll have links to all of those things in our show notes. You can find our show notes at soundnotion.tv/SN. You can find links to all the things that we've talked about today. Follow us on Twitter and recommend us on iTunes. That would be wonderful of you. Thank you so much for listening, and we will see you back next week.
Contrabassoon. I always have to say something right after Dave wraps up.
His goal is to get it in before I can cut the recording.
Speaking of contrabassoon, Mark, there's a really great